Medieval swords were created using a handle with a crossguard hilt on it, followed by a long steel blade. This type of sword right here is a thrusting sword used during fencing. Use it to pierce armor and inflict serious wounds, and usually end a fight quick. Slashing swords like this usually have a curved blade with a single edge on it. They are used to hack and slash, cut limbs off of your enemies, or inflict serious slashing wounds and bleed them to death. Maces were used for blunt force impact. Knights would use this whenever an enemy had heavy plate armor, and the mace could still inflict serious damage without penetration. On the head of the mace, which was usually made of steel or wood, would have spikes, and that would offer better penetration against your plated enemies that you were going to be fighting on the battlefield. They could also not have spikes if you were a poor peasant. It was an easy weapon for defense. Axes have been around for a very long time, and as you can see right here, you can literally make an axe out of just a stone and a stick. You sharpen the stone and you attach it to the stick, and you're good to go. They were used for hack and slash as well. You could chop limbs off, inflict serious wounds, or you could grapple your enemy with it, using the edge of your axe to hook an enemy's shield or plate armor and stumble them. They could also often have spikes on the back to offer penetration against plated armor wearers as well. Spears are one of the oldest weapons in history. You'll find them pretty much in any era that you look at, and they were commonly just a long wooden shaft followed by a bladed tip, or you could just have the shaft sharpened to a very pointed tip and use that as a spear. This right here is a javelin, and a spear is meant to be thrust or thrown. Javelins were mostly thrown. They were a lighter spear, and they could be thrown further and offered a little bit more penetration. Polearms came in many different types. They were very, very long wooden shafts followed by blades or hammers on the end. And they could also have spikes, and they were used to thrust into your enemies from a distance, or you could use it to hook someone off of their mount, or you could hook someone's shield, knock them off balance, and they also had very long spikes on them, so you could use them very long range for thrusting and penetration, or with the hammers for blunt force trauma. Bows were very common and still are. They're used in hunting nowadays. Back in warfare, though, there were composite bows and long bows, short bows, and you would use them to fling projectiles quite a distance. They required a lot of strength to be able to draw back the bigger bows, but they could launch quite a distance, and they actually offered quite a bit of penetration and impact damage as well. Crossbows were a different kind of instrument back then. They offered a quicker fire or slower fire rate with a slow reload time, but they were able to travel faster than a bow could travel. And the way you would load this is you would put your foot in the stirrup at the top of the bow right there, and you would crank back on the bowstring until it notched. Load your bolt into it, and then you would pull your crosshair trigger and send the bolt launching. They were used most commonly during defense in sieges. Warhammers were invented for blunt force trauma and penetration. On the one end, you have a hammerhead that could destroy walls and doors. And on the other one, you had a spike that you could use to penetrate plate armor, penetrate a door if needed, or hook your enemy's shields or their armor, knock them off balance, or knock them off of their mount or by grappling onto their reins and pulling. And knives are still very common even today. They were used mostly as a secondary weapon for knights whenever things got too close that they couldn't use their swords, or if they were disarmed and they didn't have any other means of defense, they'd be able to use their knives. They were also used even today for our military and for hunting. You can have utility knives that are just for cutting boxes open. There's countless things that you can use them. They are also, however, used very commonly for theft and murder, even today. Flails are probably the most dangerous weapon that someone can use, even on their own. Even just using the weapon has a risk of killing yourself. They were balls with metal spikes attached to them, attached to a chain that was attached to a wooden handle that you would then swing around your head. And you could have multiple chains with balls on them. And they were very, very deadly weapons on the battlefield, but they also posed a significant risk even to the user. If they weren't skilled enough, they risked killing themselves.